mantras of our Lord Sri Aurobindo. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says it is not enough to be in the ashram. One has to open to the Divine Mother, put away the mud which one was playing with in the world. It is enough if you love her always, remember her often, sit every day a little time before her photograph and call her. With always our love and blessings, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo's Savitri, Book 1, The Book of Beginnings, Canto 5, The Yoga of the Spirit's Freedom and Greatness, page 18. To a few is given that godlike rare release, one among many thousands never touched, engrossed in the external world's design, is chosen by a secret witness eye and driven by a pointing hand of light across his soul's unmapped immensitudes. A pilgrim of the everlasting truth, our measures cannot hold his measureless mind. He has turned from the voices of the narrow realm and left the little lane of human time. In the hushed presence of a vaster plain, he treads the vestibules of the unseen, or listens, following a bodiless guide, to a lonely cry in boundless vacancy. All the deep cosmic murmur falling still, he lives in the hush before the world was born. His soul left naked to the timeless one. Far from compulsion of created things, thought and its shadowy idols disappear. The mounds of form and person are undone. The ineffable whiteness knows him for its own. A lone forerunner of the Godward earth, among the symbols of yet unshaped things, watched by closed eyes, mute faces of the unborn, he journeys to meet the incommunicable, hearing the echo of his single steps in the eternal courts of solitude. A nameless marble fills the motionless hours. His spirit mingles with eternity's heart and bears the silence of the infinite. In a divine retreat from mortal thought, in a prodigious gesture of soul sight, his being towered into pathless heights, naked of its vesture of humanity. As thus it rose to meet him bare and pure, a strong descent leaped down, a might, a flame, a beauty half visible with deathless eyes, a violent ecstasy, a sweetness dire, enveloped him with its stupendous limbs and penetrated nerve and heart and brain, that thrilled and fainted with the epiphany. His nature shuddered in the unknown's grasp. In a moment shorter than death, longer than time, by a power more ruthless than love, happier than heaven, taken sovereignly into eternal arms, hailed and coerced by a stark absolute bliss, in a whirlwind circuit of delight and force, hurried into unimaginable depths, upborne into immeasurable heights, it was torn out from its mortality and underwent a new and boneless change. An omniscient, knowing without sight or thought, an indecipherable omnipotence, a mystic form that could contain the worlds, yet make one human breast its passionate shrine, drew him out of his seeking loneliness into the magnitude of God's embrace. As when a timeless eye annulls the hours, abolishing the agent and the act, so now his spirit shone out wide, blank, pure. His vacant mind became an empty slate on which the universal and soul could write. All that represses our fallen consciousness was taken from him like a forgotten load. A fire that seemed the body of a god consumed the limiting figures of the past and made large room for a new self to live. Message of our Divine Mother on Darshan days. Question: how do we meditate and what should we meditate on? For this, our Divine Mother says, the method is always the same. Gather together the energies in you that are usually dispersed outside. Concentrate your consciousness within, beneath the surface agitation, and establish as far as possible a perfect quietness in your heart and head. Then formulate your aspiration, if you have one, and open yourself to receive the divine force from above, says our Divine Mother. Words of our Lord Sri Aurobindo, taken from the collective works of our Lord Sri Aurobindo book, The Life Divine. Topic: the evolution of the spiritual men, page 918. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, it is true that the spiritual tendency has been to look more beyond life than towards life. It is true also that the spiritual change has been individual and not collective. Its result has been successful in man but unsuccessful or only indirectly operational in the human mass. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, it is only when nature has fully confirmed the intensive evolution and formation through the individual that anything radical of an expanding or dynamically diffusive character can be expected, or in any attempt at collective spiritual life. Such attempts have been made, but mostly as a field of protection for the growth of the individual's spirituality acquire a successful permanence. For till then, the individual must be preoccupied with his own problem of entirely changing his mind, life into conformity with the truth of the Spirit, which he is achieving or achieved in his inner being and knowledge. Any premature attempt at a large scale collective spiritual life is exposed to vitiation by some incompleteness of the spiritual knowledge on its dynamic side, by the imperfections of the individual seekers, by the invasion of the ordinary mind, vital and physical consciousness, taking hold of the truth and mechanizing, obscuring, or corrupting it. The mental intelligence and its main power of reason cannot change the principle and persistent character of human life. It can only effect various mechanizations, manipulations, developments, and formulations. But neither is mind a whole, even spiritualized, able to change it. Spirituality liberates and illumines the inner being. Spirituality liberates and illumines the inner being. It helps the mind to communicate with what is higher than itself, to escape even from itself. It can purify and uplift by the inner influence the outward nature of the individual human being, but so long as it has to work in the human mass through mind as the instrument, it can exercise an influence on the earth life, but not bring about a transformation of that life. For this reason, says our Lord, there has been a prevalent tendency in the spiritual mind to be satisfied with such an influence, and in the main to seek fulfillment in other life elsewhere, or to abandon altogether any outward going endeavor and concentrate solely on an individual spiritual salvation or perfection. A higher instrumental dynamis than mind is needed to transform totally a nature created by the ignorance. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo continues to say, another objection to the mystic and his knowledge is urged not against its effect upon life, but against his method of the discovery of truth, against the truth that he discovers. One objection to the method is that it is purely subjective, not true independently of the personal consciousness, and its constructions not verifiable. But this ground of cavil has no great value, for the object of the mystic is self-knowledge and God-knowledge, and that can only be arrived at by an inward, not by an outward gaze. Or it is the supreme truth of things that he seeks, and that too cannot be arrived at by an outwardly inquiry through the senses, or by any scrutiny or research that founds itself on the outside and surfaces, or by speculation based on the uncertain data of an indirect means of knowledge. It comes by a direct vision or contact of the consciousness with the soul and the body of the truth itself, or through a knowledge by identity, by the self that becomes one with the self of things and with their truth of power and their truth of existence. But It is urged that the actual result of this method is not one truth common to all, but there are great differences. The conclusion suggested is that this knowledge is not truth at all, but a subjective mental formation. But this objection is based on a misunderstanding of the nature of spiritual knowledge. Spiritual truth, says our Lord, is a truth of the spirit, not a truth of the intellect, not a mathematical theorem or a logical formula. It is a truth of the infinite, one in an infinite diversity, and it can assume an infinite variety of aspects and formations. In the spiritual evolution, it is inevitable that there should be many-sided passage and reaching to the one truth, a many-sided seizing of it. This many-sidedness is the sign of the approach of the soul to a living reality, not to an abstraction or a constructed figure of things that can be petrified into a dead or stony formula. The hard, logical, and intellectual notion of truth as a single idea, which all must accept, one idea or system of ideas defeating all other ideas or systems, or a single limited formula which all must recognize, is an illegitimate transference from the limited truth of the physical field to the much more complex plastic field of life and mind and spirit. This transference has been responsible for much harm. It brings into thought narrowness, limitation, and intolerance of necessary variation and multiplicity of viewpoints without which there can be no totality of truth finding, and by the narrowness and limitations, much obstinacy in error. It reduces philosophy to an endless maze of sterile disputes. Religion has been invaded by this misprison and infected with cradle dogmatism, bigotry, and intolerance. The truth of the spirit is a truth of the being and consciousness, not a truth of the thought. Mental ideas can only represent or formulate some facet, some mind translated principle or power of it, or enumerate its aspects. But to know it, one has to grow into it, be it. Without that growing and being, there can be no true spiritual knowledge. The fundamental truth of spiritual experience is one, its consciousness is one, everywhere it follows the same general lines and tendencies of awakening and growth into spiritual being. For these are the imperatives of the spiritual consciousness. But also there are, based on those imperatives, numberless possibilities of variation of experience and expression. The centralization and harmonization of these possibilities, but also the intensive soul following out of any line of experience are both of them necessary moments of the emerging spiritual consciousness force within us. Moreover, the accommodation of mind and life to the spiritual truth, its expression in them, must vary with the mentality of the seeker, so long as he has not risen above all need of such accommodation of such limiting expression. It is this mental and vital element which has created the opposition that still divides spiritual seekers or enter into their differing affirmations of the truth that they experience. This difference and variation is needed for the freedom of the spiritual search and spiritual growth. To overpass differences is quite possible, but that is most easily done in pure experience. In the mental formation, the difference must remain until one can exceed mind altogether and in a higher consciousness integralize, unify, and harmonize the many-sided truths of the spirit. says our Lord Sri Aurobindo.
Brûle la lampe qui ne s'éteint point, le feu de l'ardente aspiration, te connaître et te vivre intégralement.
A diversity in oneness is the law of the manifestation. The supramental unification and integration must harmonize these diversities, but to abolish them is not the intention of the spirit in nature.
That can never be extinguished, the fire of an ardent aspiration to know thee and totally to live